There is a particular silence that a nursery makes when it is empty, and I had heard it exactly once before that night, and I have never forgotten it. I was standing my post at the top of the north stair, the hour past 10, when the quiet came down the corridor and touched the back of my neck like a hand. I have guarded the doors of the royal House of Harrowgate for 11 years. In that time, I have learned to read a corridor the way a fisherman reads the surface of water, not by what he sees, but by what is missing. The nursery wing has its own sound. A child breathing in sleep is not silence. It is the softest of engines, a small tide of air, and the room around it hums with a life you do not notice until it stops. That night, from where I stood, the nursery hummed with nothing at all. My name is Corwin Vale. I was not that evening the most senior man on the palace roll, nor the most decorated. I was simply the one who happened to be standing where the wrongness first arrived. I have thought since that this is how most of the real work of a guardsman is done, not by the great men who plan the sweeps and command the gates, but by whichever ordinary sentry is closest when the ordinary night stops being ordinary. I did not move at first. Discipline holds you still while your mind runs ahead of your body, and mine ran now, down the length of the corridor to the tall white door of the royal nursery, where Prince Bram, 6 years old and the youngest of the Crown Prince's children, had been put to bed at 7:30. I had watched the nurse carry the lamp out at 8. I had heard through the closed door the ordinary settling of a small boy against his pillows, the creak, the sigh, the last drowsy question that no one answers. After that, the hum. And now, an hour and more later, the hum was gone. It might be nothing, I told myself, in the voice a guardsman uses to keep his own alarm on its leash. A child sleeps deeper as the night goes on. The breathing quiets. You are inventing a crisis out of your own boredom. Stay at your post. That is your post. The nursery is not your post. But there is a rule beneath all the written rules of the guard, and it is older than the House of Harrowgate and older than the crown itself, and it is this. A sentry answers to the thing he is set to protect before he answers to the line he is set to hold. The line is only ever a means. The child is the end. I had sworn that oath with my hand on the old commission the day they gave me the black bearskin and the red tunic, and I had meant it as young men mean things, largely, without knowing the weight. I knew the weight now. I left my post. I want to be honest about that, because there was a time later, not that night, but in the gray of the days that followed, when a certain lady tried to make my leaving the post the whole of the matter, as if a corridor could be more precious than a boy. But I left it, and I would leave it again, and I have made my peace with the choice 1,000 times over. I crossed the corridor with my rifle at my shoulder and my heart doing the thing hearts do when the mind has not yet admitted what it fears. 12 paces. The runner carpet swallowed my boots. At the tall white door I stopped, and I listened, and there was only the room breathing back at me with the flat, hollow patience of a room with no one in it. I knocked. Once softly, the knuckle tap a guardsman gives a royal door, not a summons, a courtesy. "Your Highness," I said low, "it's Vale on the stair." "Nothing." Children do not always answer. A sleeping child answers least of all. I told myself this. And then I put my white glove flat against the door and pushed it open, because the alternative, to stand outside a silent nursery reasoning with myself while the seconds fell, was the one thing my oath would not let me do. The lamp on the far table had been turned down but not out, and in its low amber the room lay before me exactly as a nursery should. The small bed, the blue coverlet, the shelf of painted horses, the tall window with its curtains drawn, the rocking chair where the nurse sat when a boy could not sleep, the little pair of house shoes set neatly at the foot of the bed by a careful hand. All of it in order, all of it as it should be. And the bed was empty. Not disordered, not torn. The coverlet was thrown back the way a child throws it back in a diagonal sweep, and the pillow still held the dent of a head, and the sheet was cool when I laid 2 fingers to it, cool but not cold, the warmth of a small body only lately gone, but empty. I stood in the doorway of the royal nursery of the House of Harrowgate with the lamp guttering low and my breath gone shallow. And I understood, with the flat certainty that comes before all the fear, that Prince Bram was not in his bed. I have been asked since what I felt in that moment. People want a story of terror, and I will not pretend there was none. But the truth is that a trained man does not feel much of anything in the first 3 seconds. The training stands where the feeling would be, and it moves your body while the man inside you catches up. My eyes were already going around the room. Under the bed, the darkness there was flat and empty, no small shape, no bright eye. Behind the curtain, I crossed and swept it back, and there was only the window, latched from the inside, the little brass catch turned home, the sill undisturbed. The wardrobe, I opened it, and there were the small coats hanging in their row, and a wooden sword propped in the corner, and no boy crouched among the shadows. The rocking chair, the window seat with its lid, the space behind the shelf of horses. Empty, empty, empty. Here is the thing I want you to understand, because everything that followed hung upon it. When a guardsman finds a child gone from a bed, there are 2 rooms he can stand in, and they look exactly alike. In one room the child has gone off on his own, under a bed in a farther chamber, down a stair after a cat, out to find a face he wants, and the worst that waits is a scolding and a scare. In the other room someone has taken the child, and the emptiness is the first cold edge of a horror the house has known before and prays never to know again. The 2 rooms look the same thrown coverlet, the same cooling sheet, the same terrible quiet. And a man standing in that doorway does not know which room he is in, and cannot afford to guess, and must act for the worse while praying for the better. So I did the 2 things at once that the drills had built into me. I looked with a hunter's eye for the story the room was trying to tell me, because a room always tells a story, if you are not too frightened to read it. And I moved with a sentry's speed to raise the house. The story first, because it took only the length of a held breath. The window, latched from inside. No man comes through a window and latches it behind him from without. That catch had been turned by a hand within this room. The door, I had found it closed but not locked, and there was no sign of force upon it, no scarring at the plate, no splinter. Whoever had left this room had left it by the door, on their own feet, and had drawn the door quietly to behind them, the way a person does who does not wish to be heard, or the way a small person does who has simply learned that doors are meant to be shut. And on the floor, half under the trailing edge of the coverlet where I had nearly missed it, one small house shoe. Its mate still stood at the foot of the bed. One shoe on, then. One shoe kicked loose in a hurry or lost in the dark, and its owner gone on into the palace with a single stockinged foot. A taken child does not stop to lose one shoe. A taken child is carried, whole and silent and terrified, in the crook of an arm. But a boy going somewhere of his own small stubborn will, a boy in a hurry, a boy with a purpose burning in him too bright to wait for morning, a boy like that loses a shoe and does not stop for it. I did not let myself believe it. Belief is a luxury, and I could not afford it yet. But I filed it hard, the way you file the one fact that may be the difference between a night of terror and a night of grace. The window latched, the door unforced, the single lost shoe. Someone had left this room walking and small. Then I raised the house. There is a cord in the royal nursery, silk-wrapped, that runs to a bell in the guardroom below, and I did not use it, because a bell brings men slowly, and I wanted the fastest man in the palace to know before he heard any bell. I stepped to the corridor, and I put 2 fingers to my lips, and I gave the low, carrying whistle that the guard uses in the dark hours. 2 notes falling, the note that means come, and come now, and come armed. It went down the north stair and along the gallery, and I heard, 3 heartbeats later, the answering scrape of boots as the man at the guardroom door came off his stool. And then, because a whistle is a blunt instrument, and this needed a sharper one, I did the thing that would either save the night or shame me forever if I had read the room wrong. I went to the nearest of the house telephones, a black instrument on a table beneath a portrait of some long-dead duke, and I lifted it and I asked the night operator. In the flat voice we are taught to keep so that our fear does not travel down the wire, for the private line of the Crown Prince. Because whatever room I was standing in, the room of the wandered boy or the room of the stolen one, there was exactly one man in the House of Harrowgate who had to be told first, before the king, before the Queen Consort, before the whole machinery of the palace ground into motion, and made the thing impossible to keep quiet and impossible to undo. Prince Bram was his son. Crown Prince Rowan was the father, and a father, I have always believed, has the right to be the first to be afraid. The line clicked. It rang once, and in the half-second before it was answered, I looked back through the open nursery door at the small, empty bed with its diagonal coverlet and its cooling sheet and its one abandoned shoe, and I made myself a promise that I have kept every night since and will keep until they take the tunic off my back, that I would not stop, would not sleep, would not stand still again, until that bed was full. Rowan, the voice on the line, was not sleepy. It was never sleepy, that man. He was the kind who slept like a soldier, shallow and ready, half listening even in his rest. Who is this? Vale, your highness, North Stair Sentry, Nursery Wing. I heard my own voice come out level and was grateful for it. Sir, I need you to come to the nursery, now. Quietly if you can. Prince Bram is not in his bed, and I have not yet found him. There was a silence on the line then, and it was the loudest silence I have ever heard, because it was the silence of a father's whole world tilting on its edge. I have imagined since what those 2 seconds were for him, the leap of the heart, the animal spasm of terror, the 1,000 black pictures that a parent's mind throws up faster than thought. But when he spoke again, his voice was as level as mine, or nearly, and I understood in that moment why the house would one day set the crown on this man and not on another. Have you raised the alarm? He said. Not a question really, a checklist. I've whistled the guardroom in. I've told no one else. I came to you first. Good. Keep it that way for the moment. A pause, and I could hear him moving, the rustle of a man pulling clothes over a body already halfway to the door. The window. Latch from inside, sir. The door unforced. There's a shoe lost on the floor and its mate still at the bed. I chose my next words carefully because I would not raise a hope I could not hold, and I would not let his terror run wilder than it must. Your Highness, I do not think he was taken. I think he walked out of this room on his own 2 feet. But I do not know it, and until I know it we treat this as the worst thing it could be. I need the wing sealed, every stair and every outer door before we start the search, so that if I am wrong, no one carries him past us in the dark. You'll have it, he said. I'm coming. Vale, and here the level voice cracked just once, just for the length of a single word, and I heard the father in it under the prince. Find my boy. On my life, sir, I said, and I meant it as I have never meant anything, and I put the telephone down and turned back to the empty room to begin. The first man up the stair was Ferris, the guardroom sentry, a broad, slow-spoken fellow with 20 years on me and the steadiest hands in the house. He came at a run with his rifle up and his eyes already sweeping, and I did not have to explain much, because Ferris had read the same manuals I had and had lived through the same drills, and he took in the empty bed and the thrown coverlet and the one lost shoe in a single grim glance. Which is it, he said, meaning taken or wandered? I don't know yet. We treat it as taken until I know otherwise. I was already at the corridor's head, thinking in the hard, clean lines the training lays down when there is no time for anything else. Seal the wing, both stairs, the service door by the linen room and the little door onto the terrace, that one first. It's the closest way out and the least watched. No one leaves this wing carrying anything. No one. If a man comes down a stair with a bundle in his arms, you stop him, and you do not apologize. Ferris nodded once and was gone, and I heard his whistle go down the stair 3 notes, the seal the wing call, and heard it answered from below, and then from farther below, the house waking in a widening ring the way a still pond wakes when a stone drops into its center. Doors. Boots, the particular urgent hush of trained men moving fast and saying little. It is a fearsome thing to set in motion and a beautiful one, and I have never been prouder of the machine I serve than in the minute it took that night to close its fist around the nursery wing. But a sealed wing is only a net, and a net catches nothing if the fish is already through it. So while the seal went up behind me, I went forward, into the dark of the corridor, hunting. I want to describe the palace at that hour, because you cannot understand the search unless you understand the ground it was fought upon. The nursery wing of Harrowgate is not one corridor but a warren, the old part of the house. 3 centuries of kings adding a room here and a gallery there, until the plan of it makes no sense at all. Stairs that go up 4 steps and turn and go up 4 more. Doors that open onto other doors. A long picture gallery hung with the dead of the line. A schoolroom. A day nursery full of shrouded furniture. Cupboards a grown man must stoop to enter, and a child could stand up straight inside. In daylight, it is merely rambling. At night, with the lamps turned to their lowest and the great windows throwing long gray lozenges of moonlight across the floors, it is a labyrinth, and somewhere in that labyrinth was a 6-year-old boy with 1 shoe, and I had to find him before fear found him, and before the thought I would not fully think anyone else did. I did not run. This surprises people. When you tell a man a child is lost, he pictures you sprinting, shouting the name. But a child who has hidden, and I was beginning to let myself believe he had hidden or wandered and not been carried, does not come to a running shout. A running shout is the sound of the world being angry, and a small boy who has done a thing he half knows he ought not to have done will fold himself smaller at the sound of it and hold his breath and let you pass. So I walked, and I walked softly, and I did not shout his name. I called it. Low, warm, the way you call a dog you are not cross with, the way you call a name you love. Bram, Bram, lad, it's Vale, you're not in any trouble. Over and over into the dark, a lure and not a summons. Come out now, there's a good man. No one's cross, Bram. And I read the floor as I went, because a boy leaves a wake if you know how to see it. By the schoolroom door, a scuff in the dust of the sill where a small stockinged foot had come down and pushed off. Farther on at the mouth of the picture gallery, the second shoe, the mate to the one still standing by his bed, lying on its side where he had kicked it loose or lost it in his hurry, and my heart lifted a hard inch at the sight of it, because a carried child leaves no trail of shoes, and here was the trail, 1 shoe and then the next, leading me the way he had gone. I did not stop to pick it up. I marked it and went on. He had come this way and lately and on his own feet. The gallery was the worst of it. 140 feet of it, lined both sides with the tall dark portraits of the house, and the moonlight came in through the high windows in bars, so that the whole length of it was ribbed with light and dark, and a small figure standing still against the wainscot would be swallowed whole in any one of the dark bars. I went down it slowly, calling low, sweeping each pool of shadow with my eyes. Kings looked down at me from their frames, and queens, and a whole gallery of the Harrowgate dead, and somewhere among them, I told myself, I made myself believe it, a living child was pressed into a corner listening to me come. Halfway down the gallery I stopped, because a thought had caught me, and it was a thought that changed the shape of the search. Where does a child go? Not where a man goes. A man in flight goes toward an exit, toward a way out, toward escape. But a child does not flee toward the outside of things. A child flees toward a person, or toward a comfort, or toward the answer to whatever small, enormous question has driven him out of his warm bed in the middle of the night. Bram had not been trying to leave the house. A boy of 6 does not want the cold world outside. He wants his mother's arms, or his brother's bunk, or the thing he lost, or the person he was told he could not see. The window was latched from the inside because Bram had never once looked at the window. He had gone out the door and into the palace because there was something in the palace he was going to. The trick was not to search the palace. The palace is vast. The trick was to ask what a 6-year-old wanted so badly at 10 o'clock at night that he would climb out of bed and lose both his shoes going after it. And the moment I asked it that way, I thought I knew. Because I had heard, earlier that evening half-heard, the way a sentry hears everything that passes his post and forgets most of it, a small commotion at the nursery bath hour. A boy's voice raised on the edge of tears, a nurse's voice soothing and firm, and a name repeated, the way a child repeats the one thing he wants when he is being told he cannot have it. I had not marked it at the time. It was nursery weather, the small storms that blow through a nursery every night of the world. But now, standing in the ribbed dark of the gallery with a lost boy somewhere ahead of me, I reached back into my memory for the name the boy had been crying, and I found it. Pip. I did not know yet what Pip was. A person, a pet, a toy, a friend I did not know. But I knew a child had wanted Pip badly enough to weep at bath time and had been told, evidently, that Pip could not be had, not tonight, go to sleep. And I knew that a boy who is told he cannot have the thing he wants, and who lies awake in the dark with the wanting growing louder than his obedience, will do the oldest thing in the world. He will go and get it himself. Footsteps came behind me, fast and light and not a guardsman's. I knew the tread before I turned, because I had stood outside enough of his doors to know the walk of him even at a run. The Crown Prince came down the gallery in shirt-sleeves with his collar open and his face the color of the moonlight, and he did not slow when he reached me, only caught my arm and turned me with him, and his eyes went past me down the dark corridor as if he could find his son by wanting him hard enough. "Tell me," Rowan said. "He walked out, Your Highness. I've a trail of it, one shoe, then the other this way, toward the old wing. He's not fleeing and he's not been carried. I'd stake my post on it." I hesitated, and then I gave him the one thing that mattered more than any of the rest. "Sir, who is Pip?" The prince stopped. In the barred moonlight I watched the question land on him and watched something break open behind his eyes, and for a moment I thought I had hurt him, and then I understood that it was not hurt. It was recognition. It was the look of a man handed the one small key that fits the whole terrible lock. "Pip is a cat," Rowan said. His voice had gone strange and quiet. "A gray cat. He belonged to," and here he stopped and I saw his throat move and he made himself say it. "He belonged to their mother, to Alara, to the princess. Pip was hers before the children were born. When Bram was small and the princess was ill that spring, the cat kept to Bram, slept on his bed. The boy thinks of that cat as a piece of her." He drew a breath that shook. "Vale, the cat, died 2 days ago. Old age, he was 14. We told the older children. We hadn't found the way to tell Bram. We thought we'd wait, tell him gently when the princess was back from the north. The nurse must have, at bath time, he must have asked for the cat, and he shut his eyes. He doesn't know Pip is dead. He thinks the cat is only lost." And there it was, the whole shape of the night laid bare in a single dark sentence. And it changed everything, and it changed nothing. It changed everything because now I knew what I was chasing. Not an escape, not an abduction, but a small grieving boy hunting through a sleeping palace for a cat that would never come when he called, a cat that was a piece of his mother, a cat he did not yet know was gone. And it changed nothing because a 6-year-old alone in the dark of a 3th-century palace is in danger whether he is fleeing a kidnapper or chasing a ghost, danger from the stairs, from the cold, from the deep old cisterns in the cellars, from 100 hard edges of a house that was never built for a child to wander alone at night. Grief had sent him out. Grief would not keep him safe. "Then he's calling for a cat that won't answer," I said. "And he'll go on calling and go on looking, and he won't stop and he won't come home to bed until he's found it or worn himself out cold on a stone floor somewhere. Your Highness, that's good news and bad. Good because a boy who's calling makes a noise and a boy who's looking follows a path we can guess. Bad because he'll go anywhere the cat might be, and a cat goes everywhere. High places, low places, the places we tell children never to go." "The cellars," Rowan said, and the word came out of him like something torn. We both knew the cellars. Every soul in the house knew the cellars, the old undercrofts beneath the ancient wing, a full 3 stories of them going down into the rock the palace was raised on, vaulted stone chambers and the dark passages between them, and at the bottom, the deep still water of the old cisterns that had watered the house since before the house had a name. A cat would love the cellars, warm near the great flues, alive with mice, 100 places to curl and hide. A child would follow a cat anywhere. And the cellars had no rail on the cistern stairs, and the water at the bottom was black and cold and older than kingdoms, and a small boy in the dark, leaning to call a cat, could. I did not finish the thought. I have learned not to. You finish that thought and it eats the strength you need. I put it away and I moved. Sir, listen to me now and forgive me for giving you orders. I had no right to, and I did it anyway, because a frightened father is a danger to a search, and I would rather be broken from the guard than lose the boy to his father's love. I need you calm and I need you useful, and the two are the same thing tonight. Do not shout his name. If we all go roaring through the house, he'll hide from the noise and we'll walk past him in the dark. We call low, we call kind, we say he's not in trouble. And I need you to send word quietly to have the cellar doors watched but not filled with men. If he's headed down there, I don't want a crowd of boots between me and him. 1 or 2 of my steadiest, no more. Can you do that? To his lasting credit, and I have loved him for it every day since, the Crown Prince of Harrowgate, whose son was lost in the dark, did not argue with a common sentry giving him commands. He looked at me for 1 second and he saw that I knew my trade, and he chose to trust it over his own terror, which is the hardest thing a frightened man can ever do. Yes, he said, tell me where you need me. Behind me and a little to the side, 2 sets of eyes on 2 sides of every dark, and keep talking to him low as we go, your voice, not mine. If he hears his father calling kind and easy, he'll come. He'll come to you before he comes to me. I have said I had heard the silence of an empty nursery once before, and I owe you that, because it is why I did not hesitate at the top of the north stair, and why I could not have hesitated if my life had depended on it. It was not in this house. It was long before this house, in the war years, when I was younger than the men I now command, and posted to a garrison town that the fighting had not yet reached, and everyone swore it never would. There was a family billeted near the barracks, and a woman with a baby, and I used to hear the child through the thin wall in the evenings, that same soft small tide of a sleeping infant breathing. And one night the shelling that was never coming came, and in the gray morning after I helped dig, and there was a nursery in that house, and it was silent, and I have never in 20 years forgotten the exact quality of that silence. The hum switched off, the small engine stopped. I did not save that child. There was nothing to save by the time we reached it. I have carried the not saving of that child up every stair I have ever guarded since, and I have sworn on it, without words, at 1,000 quiet posts, that if ever again I heard a nursery go silent under my watch, I would be through the door before the silence had finished falling. So when Bram's room went quiet that night, it was not only a boy of 6 I was running toward. It was a debt 20 years old. A man does not weigh a debt like that. He pays it. So that is how we hunted, the prince and the sentry, down the ribbed gallery and into the older wing, 2 grown men moving soft as thieves through their own house, calling a small boy's name into the dark in the gentlest voices we owned. Bram, Bram, lad, it's Papa. You're not in any trouble, love, I promise you. Come out to me. And under it my own low, steady lure. It's Vale, Bram, I'm not cross. Come and find me. And the house gave us nothing back but its own old creaking and the wind at the high windows, and once, the skitter of some small living thing along a distant wainscot that stopped both our hearts until we knew it for a mouse. We found the 3rd sign at the head of the old service stair, the narrow stone stair, hardly wider than a man's shoulders, that spiraled down toward the cellars. A smear on the 3rd step, low, at a child's hand height on the wall. Dust wiped away in the shape of small fingers, where a boy had steadied himself going down into the dark. He had been told 100 times never to enter. Rowan saw it the same instant I did and made a sound I will not try to write, and started for the stair, and I put my arm across him. I laid my hand on the chest of the heir to the throne, and I held him back, because A father plunging down a black spiral stair after his lost son is how you get two people at the bottom instead of one. Slow, I said. Slow, sir. He went down slow. See the handprint. He was careful. He was minding the wall. He's not hurt and he's not fallen, or the marks wouldn't be so even. We go down the same way he did. Slow, careful, and quiet so we hear him. I went first. I will not pretend the descent of that stair was anything but the longest walk of my life. The lamp I had taken from a bracket in the gallery threw my own huge shadow up the curving wall ahead of me, and every step took me deeper into the cold, and the cold had a smell to it, the wet stone smell of the deep cellars, and somewhere below in the dark was a small warm boy, or was a small cold, no. I would not think it. Down and down, the stair curling always to the left, the handprints on the wall going with me, small and even and careful, the trail of a boy who had come this way, not fleeing and not hurt, but hunting, calling in his small voice for a cat that could not answer, going down into the one part of the house that could take him from us in an instant if we did not reach him first. And then from below, from the dark at the bottom of the stair, I heard it. A voice, small and thin and unmistakably alive, and my knees very nearly went from under me with the force of the relief of it, because a dead boy makes no sound, and this boy was making sound, was talking, low and coaxing and patient, the exact tone a child uses on an animal that will not come. Pip, the small voice was saying, somewhere below us in the dark. Pip, please, Pip, it's only me, come out. I brought you the fish from my supper, look, it's in my hand, come out and have it. Pip, please, don't be lost too. Don't be lost too. I have carried those 3 words for the rest of my life. A boy of 6, alone in the black cellars of an ancient palace at 11 at night, coaxing a dead cat with a scrap of supperfish gone cold in his fist, and the whole of a mother he half remembered, and a grief he could not name folded down into 3 small words offered to the dark. Don't be lost too. Behind me on the stair, I heard the boy's father make a sound like a man struck, and I turned, and I caught his arm hard, before his heart could send him crashing down those last steps. We have him, I breathed. We have him, sir, he's there, he's alive, he's talking, but you cannot rush him. Hear me. He's in the dark by the cisterns and he doesn't know we're here. You come at a lost child fast in the dark and you frighten him, and a frightened child steps back and there is water back there and no rail. We go the last step slow and easy and we let him see us before he hears us. Slow, your highness. We've won. Don't lose it now by winning it too fast. The prince mastered himself. I felt it happen under my hand, the great shudder of a father wanting to run, and then the harder thing, the choosing not to, the trust laid down like a weapon. He nodded, and we went down the last turn of the stair together, slow and quiet, and I lifted the lamp so that its light would go before us into the chamber and announce us gently, a warm glow before a hard face, and I stepped off the last stair into the great cold vault of the old Undercroft. It was a wide, low room of black arches, the ceiling springing from squat pillars into the dark, and the far end of it fell away down 3 broad stone steps to the lip of the old cistern. A still black rectangle of water, wide as a small room, deep as a well, that had held the house's water since the first stone was laid. There was no rail. There has never been a rail. Men who work the cisterns know the edge, and no child was ever meant to be down here to need one. And there, at the very top of those 3 broad steps, not 4 feet from the black lip of the water, sat Prince Bram of the House of Harrowgate, cross-legged on the cold stone in his nightshirt, one shoe gone and one shoe he had never had, a scrap of cold fish held out in his small, open palm toward the dark, calling for his cat. He heard the lamp before he saw us, heard, I think, the change in the dark the way a shadow lightens. He turned, and his small white face came round into the lamplight, and it was streaked with the tracks of tears and with the grime of the cellars and with a stubborn hope that broke my heart clean across. And when he saw who it was, his father, and behind him the tall red and black shape of a guardsman, he knew, his face did not fill with the relief we longed for. It crumpled. Because he was 6, and he was tired, and he was frightened in a way he was too young to name, and he had been found before he had finished the impossible thing he had come to do. "I can't find Pip," he said, and his voice broke on the cat's name and the tears came in earnest now. "I looked everywhere. I called and he won't come. He's lost. He's lost and it's dark and I can't find him and here he did the thing that stopped both our hearts. He turned, on the cold stone, at the very lip of the black water, and he leaned out over the cistern to peer into it, to call his cat one more time into the deep, and his small hand came down on the wet stone of the edge to brace himself, and it slipped. I have relived that half-second 10,000 times. He did not fall. I want that plain before I write another word. He did not fall. The child was never in the water. The worst thing did not happen. But his hand slipped on the wet stone and his small body tipped an inch toward the black, and in that inch the whole weight of the night came down and I was already moving. I have been told since that no man could have crossed that vault as fast as I crossed it. I do not know. I do not remember choosing to move. I only remember that between the slip of his hand and the catch of mine there was no time at all, and then he was against my chest, gathered up whole and safe, and howling into the wool of my tunic, and I had gone down on one knee on the cold stone at the very edge of the water with the child clamped against me and my own heart going like a struck bell, and the black cistern lay a hand's breadth from my boot, still and undisturbed and cheated of what it had almost been given. "I have you," I said into his hair over and over, the only words in me. "I have you, you're safe. I have you, lad, you're safe now, I have you." He howled. He howled the way a child howls when the fear he has been holding at bay all through his brave, lonely quest finally catches up and overtakes him. The way a child howls only when he is finally, absolutely safe, because a truly frightened child goes silent, and a child who has just been made safe lets the whole storm out at once. He clung to my neck with both cold hands and he howled for his cat, and for his mother far away in the north, and for the dark, and for the fear, and for all of it. The whole enormous grief of a 6-year-old that will not fit inside a 6-year-old, and had driven him out of his bed and down into the black earth of the house to look for the one warm thing he thought could hold it. And I knelt there on the stone at the edge of the water, and I held him and I let him howl, and I did not shush him, because there are cries that must be cried all the way out before a soul can rest. The Crown Prince came the last steps and went down on his knees on the wet stone beside us, and he did not take the boy from me. I have thought about that since, that in that first moment he let his son go on clinging to the guard who had caught him, but laid his hand on the small heaving back and put his brow down against his son's hair, and I heard him breathe, once, the enormous ragged breath of a man who has been holding the whole world up by his teeth and has just been allowed to set it down. And then softly, so softly, he began to tell his son the true thing, the hard, kind thing, the thing they had been waiting to tell him gently and could wait to tell no longer. Bram, love, look at me. Pip isn't lost." He gathered the boy's wet face in both his hands and turned it up to his own. "Pip isn't lost, my darling. Pip was very old and very tired, and 2 days ago he went asleep and he didn't wake up. He didn't run away and he isn't lost in the dark. He's not cold and he's not frightened. He's only gone the way old cats go, the way grandmother went, remember, gently and to sleep. You couldn't find him because he isn't hiding. He's just gone, and it's all right that it makes you so sad. It's the saddest thing, and you're allowed to be as sad as you are." I watched the boy take it in. I watched a child learn the shape of a grief he had been running from all night, and I watched the running stop, because you cannot run any longer once the thing has caught you and told you its name. He did not howl now. He went still against his father, and the tears came slow and steady and quiet, the tears of the newly and truly bereaved, and he said in the smallest voice in the world, "But he was Mama's." "He was," said Rowan. "He was Mama's, and then he was yours, and that's why it hurts so, because loving something is the only thing that can hurt this much, and I'll tell you a secret." He wiped the boy's face with his thumb. "Mama will want to be very sad about Pip too when she comes home, and you'll be sad together, And that's how we'll carry it, not one of us all alone in the dark, but all of us together in the light. You don't ever have to go looking in the dark alone again. Do you hear me? Whatever's lost, whatever hurts. You come to me, or you come to your mother, or, and here he looked up at me over his son's head, and something passed between us that I have never had words for. Or you come to a man in a red coat, any of them, any hour of the day or night, and you say, I need help, and the whole house will move to give it to you. That is what we are for. That is what all of this is for. Do you understand? Bram, against his father's chest, gave the smallest nod. And then, because he was 6, and because the very young carry grief and comfort in the same breath, he lifted his grimy, tear-streaked face and looked at me and said, You run very fast. I did, I said. I run fast for the people I mind about. You're one of those. Am I in trouble? No, lad. And I meant it, and I have never in my life meant anything more gently. No, you did a brave thing and a foolish thing both at once, the way brave and foolish so often come together. We'll talk about the foolish part in the morning, you and I, when we've all had some sleep about the cellars and the dark and telling a grown person before you go hunting. But you're not in trouble. You went looking for someone you loved. There's no trouble in the whole world for that. We carried him up out of the cellars into the light, the prince and I gave the low, all-clear whistle at the head of the stair, the 2 rising notes that stand the house down, and it went up through the wing ahead of us, and I heard the great held breath of the palace let go. Men came, and the nurse, weeping and white with the terror of what her one soft mercy at bath time had nearly cost, and I made a point, before I did anything else, of catching her eye and giving her the smallest shake of my head. Not you, it was not her fault, and I would not have her carry it as one. A nurse who cannot bring herself to tell a grieving child a hard truth at bedtime is guilty of nothing but tenderness, and tenderness is not a crime, and I would say so to anyone who tried to make it one. As it happened, I would have to say so, and soon. But that came later. First there was the boy to see safe, and a bath run warm and cocoa, and the older children, Malin and Torin, woken by the stir and standing anxious in the nursery doorway in their nightclothes, to be reassured and folded back into their beds. First there was the ordinary tender machinery of a house putting its youngest to rights. I stood my post outside the nursery door while it went on, because that was my post, and a man goes back to his post, and I did not leave it again until the gray of the dawn came up in the high windows, and Prince Bram was long asleep with his father in the chair beside his bed, and the whole wing was breathing its soft, ordinary, life-filled hum once more. I listened to that hum for an hour before I let myself believe in it. The nursery was not empty any longer. That was all I wanted in the world. I thought, foolishly, that the night's danger had ended at the lip of the cistern. I was wrong. The danger to the boy had ended there. But there is more than one kind of danger in a palace, and the House of Harrowgate held, in those days, a danger that wore silk and moved by daylight and struck not at children but at the men who guarded them. I mean the Queen Consort, I mean Morwenna. I will try to write of her fairly, though it is hard, and I have had years to learn how and have not fully managed it. She was the king's second wife, married after the death of the first queen, after Isolde, the king's true and beloved first queen, whose portrait hung in the state gallery and whose memory the whole house kept like a lamp. Morwenna had come into the house as its queen but never into its heart, and she knew it, and the knowing had curdled in her into a long, patient campaign to make the house hers, to move her own people into its offices, to shift its loyalties toward her own son and daughter, to erase, inch by careful inch, the place that the dead queen and the dead queen's grandchildren still held in the affections of the realm. She did not love the Crown Prince's children. She saw them, I think, as obstacles, 3 small heirs standing between her own boy and the throne, and though she was far too clever ever to say such a thing aloud, a guardsman who stands enough silent hours at enough doors comes to know the temperature of a house, and the temperature of that house, wherever the Queen Consort passed, dropped several degrees. And so when the story of the night reached her, as everything reached her, through the web of servants and secretaries she had spun through every wing, she did not hear a story of a grieving child found safe. She heard a story of a security lapse in the nursery wing. She heard a guardsman who had abandoned his post. She heard, above all, an opportunity. She struck 2 mornings later at the king's own council table in the daylight, before the assembled great men of the house, which was her way, never in the shadows, always in the open where the wound would be seen and remembered. The council had been called, reasonably enough, to examine how a child of the house had come to be lost for the better part of an hour in the dead of night, and what must be changed so that it never happened again. That was a proper question, and I would have answered it gladly. But the Queen Consort had come to ask a different one. I was summoned to stand before them. A common sentry called into the council chamber, which is not a thing that happens once in a decade, and I stood at the foot of that long table under the eyes of the king and the Crown Prince and the Queen Consort and a dozen lords and secretaries, with my bearskin under my arm and my spine as straight as I could make it, and I waited to be asked how the boy had been found. But the first voice that spoke was hers. "This is the man," said Queen Morwenna. She did not look at me. She looked at the king and at the lords, arranging her face into an expression of grave and reluctant concern, the face of a woman forced by her duty to say a hard thing. "This is the sentry who was set to guard the nursery stair on the night the young prince was lost. Set to guard it, and who left it, who abandoned his post in the dark and went wandering off through the house on his own notion, so that for the better part of an hour there was no man at all upon the north stair. I ask this council to consider what might have happened. I ask you to consider that while this man was off following his fancies through the galleries, that stair, the very stair that guards the sleeping children of this house, stood open and unwatched. If the child had been taken, truly taken, by an enemy of this house, of whom I need hardly remind you we are not short, this man's empty post is the door by which they would have carried him out. He abandoned his charge. Whatever the outcome, that fact remains. And I say that a guard which permits its men to leave their posts whenever they take a notion is no guard at all. And I ask that this man be dismissed from the house, this day, as an example, so that no sentry of Harrowgate ever again decides for himself that his oath means less than his own whim. It was very cleverly done. I will grant her that even now. There was truth in it. I had left my post, and truth is the most dangerous thing a lie can be built upon, because it gives the lie a foundation of stone. And she had wrapped it in the language of security, of duty, of the very discipline the guard exists to embody, so that to defend me looked like defending indiscipline, and to condemn me looked like defending the children. She had turned the man who ran to the child into the man who had endangered him, and she had done it before the king in the open, where a retreat would look like weakness. I said nothing. It was not my place to speak until I was bidden, and I would not give her the satisfaction of watching me flinch. I stood at the foot of the table and I looked at the far wall, and I kept my face as still as I have ever kept it in 11 years of standing still for a living, and inside I felt the old cold settle, the sentry's cold, the stillness that is the setup before whatever must come. For a moment no one spoke, and the council chamber held its breath, and I saw 2 or 3 of the older lords glance at one another, uneasy, because they had been soldiers once and they knew the smell of a man being sacrificed for a woman's purpose, and they did not like it, but they did not yet see how to gainsay a queen. And then the Crown Prince rose from his seat. Rowan did not raise his voice. He never did. It was one of the things that made men listen to him. He stood, and he set his hands flat on the table, and he looked down its length at the Queen Consort with an expression I had never seen him wear toward her, not anger, though there was anger under it, but something colder and more final, the look of a man who has just decided he is done pretending. "Madam," he said, "you have described the night. Let me describe it more fully, since you have left out the part that matters. You say this man abandoned his post. Here is what this man did. He stood his post in perfect silence and perfect stillness as he had stood it for hours, and in that silence he heard, not saw, heard, through a closed door from 12 paces off, that the breathing of a sleeping child had stopped. No alarm had sounded. No bell had rung. Nothing had happened that any regulation would have told him to act upon. Every rule you cherish, madam, every letter of the discipline you have just invoked, told him to stand exactly where he stood and do exactly nothing. And he understood in that moment that the rules he had sworn to keep existed for one reason only, to keep my son alive, and that on this one night keeping the letter of them would have meant leaving my son to whatever had taken the breath out of that room. So he broke the smaller rule to keep the greater one. He left the post to save the thing the post exists to save. And because he did, my son is asleep upstairs this morning instead of. He stopped. He could not say it. No father could. And the not saying of it rang louder in that chamber than any word he might have found. You ask what might have happened had the boy been taken, Rowan went on, and now there was iron in it. I will tell you what would have happened had this man been the kind of guard you are asking me to reward, the kind who stands at his post no matter what, who never acts on his own judgment, who waits always for a bell and an order. That guard would have stood at the top of the north stair through the whole of that night, correct and disciplined and useless, while my son went down alone into the cellars in the dark. That guard would have been found still at his post in the morning, having guarded an empty room to perfection, and my son would have been in the water. That, madam, is the guard your rule builds. This house does not want him. This house wants the man standing in front of you, the man who knows the difference between the rule and the reason for the rule, and who, when the two of them part company on a dark night, has the courage and the wit to follow the reason. I would not dismiss him. I would pin a medal on him, and I would have every man in the guard told exactly what he did so that they learn it. Your post is a means. The child is the end. Never confuse them. The silence after that was a different silence entirely, and I have stood in a great many silences and can tell them apart. This was the silence of a room that has just watched a scale tip. The old lords were nodding now, openly, some of them. A soldier knows the truth of a thing like that in his bones, and Rowan had spoken it in the language soldiers keep. And the Queen Consort's face, which had worn its mask of grave concern so well, showed for one instant, one only, before she smoothed it away, the flat white anger of a hand that has reached for a thing and closed on empty air. But it was the king who ended it, and the way he ended it is the reason I am still telling this story, instead of some other man telling how the guard broke a good sentry to please a queen. King Alaric had said nothing the whole while. He was old by then and slow to speak, and he had the habit of the very old and the very powerful of letting others empty themselves out before he said the one thing that would settle it. He sat at the head of the table with his hands folded and his heavy-lidded eyes moving from face to face, and when his son finished, he let the silence run a while longer, until it was clear the room was his. Then he turned those eyes on me. "Guardsman," he said, "Vale is it, look at me." I looked at him. "You do not disobey that voice. My son has spoken for you, and he has spoken well, and every word of it is true," the king said. "But I would hear one thing from your own mouth, and I will judge you by your answer more than by all his eloquence. When you stood at that door and heard the silence and knew the rule, knew that every letter of your training said stand still, what was in your mind? Tell me plainly. Did you weigh it? Did you reason it out, the rule against the reason, and choose? Or did you simply go?" I understood dimly that a great deal hung on my answer, and that a cleverer man than I might have shaped it to sound well. But I have never been a clever man, and I have found that the plain truth, offered whole, has a strength that no cleverness can match. So I gave him the plain truth. "Your Majesty, there was no weighing. There was no time for weighing, and if there had been, I do not think I would have waited any better. I heard the room go wrong, and I was across the corridor before I had decided anything at all. My feet were at the door before my mind had caught up to them. If your Majesty asks me whether I chose the boy over the post, I must answer honestly that I did not choose. The choosing had been done years ago, on the day I took the oath, and it had gone so deep in me by now that when the moment came it was not a choice any longer. It was only what I am. I paused, and then I said the last of it, because it was true and because I would not stand before my king and shave the truth to save my place. If that is a fault, sire, then I am at fault, and I will not pretend otherwise to keep my post. But I will tell your majesty this as well. I would do it again tonight. I would do it 1,000 times. And any man of the guard worth the red coat on his back would do the same, and I would not want to serve beside one who would not. The king looked at me for a long moment, and then, slowly, the old man smiled, not a large smile, but a real one, the smile of a man who has found the thing he was looking for. There, he said, and he turned it on the whole table and last of all unhurried on the Queen Consort. There is the guard I want at my grandchildren's doors, not a man who guards the rule, a man who guards the child and who has driven the guarding of the child so deep that it moves faster than his own thought. You would have me dismiss him, madam. I will not dismiss him. I will do what my son said, and better. He raised one heavy hand. Let it be entered on the roll that on this night the sentry Corwin Vale did honor to his oath, and to this house, and that his conduct is held up to the whole guard, as the standard by which a guardsman's judgment shall be measured. And let one more thing be entered beside it. And here the old eyes came back to Morwenna, and there was nothing slow about them now. That this council, having heard the matter fully, finds no fault whatsoever in the man, and directs that the matter be closed, and that no further word be spoken against him by any person of this house, on pain of the king's grave displeasure. Is that understood, madam? By any person? It was not a question. Morwenna inclined her head the exact half-inch that duty required, and not one hair more, and her face was smooth as ever. But I had learned to read that house, and I read in the set of her jaw that she had lost this hand and knew it and would remember it. She had reached for a guardsman's neck, and the king had struck her hand away in front of the whole council. It was not the end of her, such women do not end so easily, but it was a defeat, plain and public, and the house saw it, and the house would not forget it either. And yet I will be honest, because honesty is the only thing worth having when the tale is done. She had not been entirely wrong. This is the part men leave out when they tell the story as a simple triumph, the good guard and the wicked queen and the wise king. The truth is muddier and more useful. She had been wrong about me, but she had not been wrong that there was a real hole in the guarding of the nursery, and that a child had fallen through it, and that if I had not read the room and run, the very same emptiness she pointed at could have been walked through by a man with worse intentions than a boy's grief. The scare was child-safe. The lesson was not. For here was the thing the council learned, once the heat of the quarrel had cooled and cooler heads went over the night with a soldier's care. On any ordinary night, a single sentry at the head of the north stair was thought guard enough for the nursery wing, because the wing was a dead end, with only the one stair down and the little terrace door below, and a man on the stair could see the one and hear the other. But that reasoning had a flaw in it, and the flaw was me. It assumed the one sentry would never have cause to leave the stair, and on the night I had cause, the wing had no second man, and for the better part of an hour the terrace door below stood watched by no one at all. The boy had not gone that way. The boy had gone down into the cellars. But he might have gone out the terrace door into the dark gardens, small and cold and alone, and no soul the wiser. Or, and this is the thought that put the iron into the king's face when it was laid before him, a man who wished the house ill, watching the wing and its single sentry, would need only to draw that one sentry away, by any small contrivance, to have his hour with an unwatched door and a wing full of sleeping heirs. So the emptiness of the nursery, which had begun as one small boy's grief, ended as a lesson written into the standing orders of the whole guard, and it is written there to this day. The reasoning went like this, and I set it down because it is the true resolution of the night, more than any medal. A post that can be emptied by the very thing it exists to answer is no post at all. If the man on the stair might have to run, and the night had proved he might, and had proved that he should, then the man on the stair could not be the only man. From that season on, the nursery wing of Harrowgate was held by 2 guardsmen and not one, a sentry at the stair, and a second man below at the terrace door, each within sight or call of the other, so that if ever again a room went wrong and a guard had to break his post to answer it, the wing behind him would not fall open in his wake. And the cellar doors below were fitted, that same month, with a simple bolt set high on the frame, above a child's reach and below a grown man's eye, so that never again could a small determined griever go down alone into the dark by the water. It cost the house almost nothing. It closed the hole forever, and it was born entirely out of one boy's love for a gray cat and one guard's decision to run. That is the shape of the thing, and it is a better shape than the simple triumph because it is true. The Queen Consort had pointed at a real wound and tried to use it to cut down a good man. The king had saved the good man and then, being wise, had gone and healed the wound as well, so that her weapon was taken from her twice over, once for the man she meant it against, and once for the house she pretended to defend. There was no man left for her to blame and no gap left for her to point to. She had raised the alarm of security to destroy a guardsman, and the house had answered the alarm properly, and in answering it had made itself safer than her spite had ever intended. I have thought since that this is the finest revenge an honest house can take upon a scheming one, not to strike back, but to take the very fear the schemer raised and turn it into good order, so that the scheme leaves the house stronger than it found it. I saw the boy again the next morning as I had promised. He came to find me at my post, small and solemn and washed and mended, holding his father's hand, and his father let go of it a little distance off and let the boy come the last steps to me alone, which I understood and honored. Bram stopped in front of me and looked a long way up. I am a tall man and he was a small boy, and he said, in the careful voice of a child who has rehearsed a thing, "Papa says I have to say sorry for going in the cellars because it was dangerous and you were frightened for me. So I'm sorry. I won't go in the dark alone again. If something's lost, I'll come and get a grown person." That's the whole of the lesson, I told him, and you've learned it in a night, which is faster than most men learn it in a life. I'm proud of you. And then, because a child needs more than a scolding to grow well, I went down on one knee so that my eyes were level with his, and I told him the other half, the half that mattered more. And I'll tell you something else, and I want you to keep it. You went into the dark, alone, at night, into the one place in the whole house you were most afraid of, for the sake of someone you loved. That was foolish, and we've dealt with the foolish part, and it's done. But the thing underneath the foolishness, the loving someone so much you go into the dark for them, that is not foolish. That is the best thing in you. Don't ever let anyone teach you to be ashamed of it. You only have to learn to do it wisely. Loving people and going into the dark for them, done wisely, with the right people beside you, why, lad, that is more or less the whole of what a guardsman is. You'd make a fine one if you weren't going to be something grander. He thought about that with the enormous seriousness of the very young. Then he said, "Was Pip in the dark? When he went to sleep and didn't wake up, was he in the dark and scared all by himself?" And I understood that this was the real question, the one under all the others, the one that had driven him down the stair, the child's terror not of death but of being alone in it, lost in the dark with no one coming. So I gave him the truest comfort I had, which I believe with my whole heart to this day. "No," I said, "he wasn't in the dark and he wasn't alone. Old cats know when it's time and they go easy and they're not afraid because they've had a whole long life of being warm and loved, and that goes with them. Pip had you loving him for the last of his years, sleeping on your bed, warm every night. That's what he took with him, you. Nobody who's been loved like that goes into any dark alone. Do you understand? The loving is the thing that goes with them. You gave it to him. He carried it out. He was never once alone. The boy looked at me for a long moment, and then, all at once, the way the young do, the grief let go of him, not gone. It would come and go for a long time yet. Grief does but its worst grip loosed, and he nodded, and he was, for the first time since the night, all right. He reached out and touched one of the brass buttons of my tunic with a solemn finger, as if sealing a bargain, and then he turned and ran back to his father, and I heard him say, going, "Papa, Vale says Pip took the loving with him and wasn't alone." And I heard the Crown Prince's voice go rough as he answered, and I turned my eyes front and stood my post and let them have their morning. I have stood a great many posts since that night, and I will stand a great many more before they take the red coat off me. But I have never again heard a nursery go silent without my whole body coming awake, and I do not think I ever will, and I would not have it otherwise. People imagine a guardsman's discipline is the stillness, the not moving, the not speaking, the statue at the door. It is not. The stillness is only the sheath. The discipline is the readiness inside it, the whole of a man wound tight and quiet and patient at his post, for hours, for years, for a life, so that in the 1/2 second the readiness is needed it is already there, already moving, faster than thought, faster than fear. We stand still so that we can run when it matters. That is the trade. That is the whole of it. The nursery was completely empty that night. And then it was not, because a man read an empty room and ran toward the fear instead of away from it, and caught a boy at the lip of the dark and carried him back into the light. And a king, being wise, took the whole hard night, the grief, and the danger, and the scheming, and the lapse, and turned every part of it to good. The boy comforted, the guard honored, the schemer checked, the hole in the wall closed forever. The bed was full again by dawn. The wing breathed its soft, ordinary hum. And a small boy learned, young, the thing it takes most men a lifetime to learn if they learn it at all, that whatever is lost, and however dark the place it seems to have gone, you never have to go into that dark alone. There is always a hand. There is always someone who will run. That is what the red coats are for. That is what they have always been for. And as long as there is one boy in that house who needs the running, there will be a man at the door, still as a statue and wound tight as a watch spring, waiting for the silence that means it is time to move.